Robert Plank Show, episode 318. Add storytelling to your marketing for amazing results in any startup pitch meeting, stage presentation, or job interview with the pitch whisperer, John Livesay. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. We're talking right now with John Livesay, and John is the pitch whisperer, which means he helps people craft a compelling pitch that tugs at the heartstrings so people open their purse strings. John hosts the Successful Pitch podcast, and he's the author of The Successful Pitch, Conversations on Going from Invisible to Investable. So John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Robert. Glad to be with you.
I am glad that you are here with me, and so can you kind of tell us a little bit in your own words who you are and what you do?
Sure. As you said, I'm the pitch whisperer, and I help people go from invisible to investable. And that's what I tell people when I meet them at a cocktail party or at a networking event, just enough to get them intrigued to say, well, that's interesting. Tell me more. What's a pitch whisperer? I know what a horse whisperer is. So I say, well, like a horse whisperer, I help people with their confidence because people get nervous when they have to pitch to get a new client, to get funding for their startup, or interviewing for a job. And then they go like, well, how do you take people from invisible to investable? And then we have a conversation as opposed to just telling everybody all the details of what I do. I teach people when you give an elevator pitch, just say enough that's intriguing people to say, tell me more.
Awesome, and that's pretty cool because yeah, even like your branding or a little bit about their like how you explain that, it's like enough there to sort of get the point across, but then it's sort of like wets my whistle and it's sort of playful and sort of gets me intrigued. So that's pretty cool there, and I like how sort of what you've kind of established yourself as. It applies to all these different things, right? It applies to, like you said, like a job interview or someone looking to get funding or someone looking to just get some sort of a deal made. So I'm really curious, like how did this kind of like branding come about for you?
Well, I worked at Condé Nast, which publishes big brands like GQ, Wired, Vanity Fair, W, Vogue, Architectural Digest, etc. And I sold media for them, print, digital, and video, and packaged all those brands together for big companies like Guess and Lexus. And they asked me to find startups that they could use to stay cutting edge and innovative. And during that process, I realized that a lot of tech startups in particular are not really good at pitching to get new clients. They confuse people, they bore people. And so I realized that there's a whole group of tech people in particular, whether they're a tech startup or even an architect, that's not really good at selling. And I have now decided 3 years ago to go out on my own as the pitch whisperer. That's what Inc. magazine called me, and help people become storytellers, because Plato said storytellers rule the world. And I tell people, you know what, forget selling and tell stories instead. And then you pull people in and you'll get hired, you'll get new clients or funding.
Awesome. So how does this whole storytelling thing work? Because like I've seen some people sort of do this. I don't know if it's like they're doing it incorrectly, but sometimes some people like they try to tell me a story and it's like super long-winded, or they try to stack a bunch of stories and I'm just like, like they're using too many
Yeah.
metaphors or whatever. So I mean, like what's the secret to making that story that kind of fits and is fun but also doesn't take forever to get out?
Sure. A good story, Robert, has four elements: exposition, who, what, where, when; problem, a solution, and a resolution. Let me give you an example. One of my clients, Martin, I was helping him with his confidence and stacking his moments of certainty, which simply means writing down 3 or 4 times in your life when you knew you nailed it and where you built your confidence up. And we stack all those moments up before you go into pitch to get hired or get a new client, as opposed to the negative self-talk that can happen. So Martin said, one of those stories for me is remembering that, I was born in South America, but I grew up in the Netherlands. And when I turned 18, my parents took me back to South America and dropped me off naked in the Amazon jungle because in my culture, that's the rite of passage into manhood. I said, wow, that's a good story. What did you learn in the jungle? And he said, well, I learned how to focus and pivot and persevere. I said, great. And we're going to take those lessons from the Amazon jungle to the concrete jungle of being an entrepreneur. And when he had that pitch down, he got his startup funded because the investor said, we're going to put our money on the guy that survived the Amazon jungle because he can survive anything that happens in his business.
Awesome. I mean that is pretty crazy. So did I hear you right in that when you have sort of these coaching clients of yours, is that the starting point you take them on is for them to think back of those 3 or 4 times in their life when they really nailed it?
Yes, that's one of many steps to build their confidence. And then the storytelling part of it is what we just referenced earlier. So if we break down the story of Martin, the exposition is he's 18 years old, he's naked in the jungle. And sometimes when he was practicing, he would forget to say that's a rite of passage into manhood. I said, if you don't say that, it sounds like child abuse. So we need to paint a picture for people when you tell a good story of taking us where they are. And then there's a problem. Obviously, he's there for 2 weeks and he's got to figure out how to survive. The solution is he does and learns some life lessons. And then the resolution is he got his startup funded. So that's the structure to a good short story, just right there.
Awesome. And so that structure really helps that. So exposition, problem, solution, resolution. And this is sort of making a lot more sense. So it sounds like to me that when some people sort of try to use a story and it kind of gets off track or doesn't really do what it's supposed to, it sounds like it's because maybe they didn't have that sort of structure. Like it wasn't, they're just telling a story just for the heck of it and doesn't really it's not really solving anything or doesn't really start with a problem. So that way they're just kind of talking and meandering. I mean, would you say that's sort of like the big difference, like having that
Yes.
structure versus not?
Yes, having structure is in key. You must take people on a journey. They call about the hero's journey. You think of movies. They all, there's a problem. Let's talk about storytelling genres. This is another example of what a good story is. Pick a genre and then use that structure. So one genre is rags to riches. Well, a movie that does that is Cinderella, right? She's sitting by the fireplace and then suddenly she's Cinderella. A brand that takes part of that is Johnny Walker Scotch. He used to be this poor Scottish farmer, and now he's Johnny Walker. Another genre is the rebirth, and that, of course, the movie is It's a Wonderful Life. And Prudential says, you know what? Your retirement is your third act. It's literally a rebirth. So there's some examples of two storytelling genres: a movie and a brand that's using that genre to tell their story. So you have to figure out what genre you want to use and how that fits into your overall story. So there's a theme that you're taking people on, and any story has a problem that the hero has to overcome. And ideally, the solution is your product. And then what happens after people have used your product or hired you to design their offices or whatever it is, you have a happy resolution, right? They're more productive now, they have light, people are more engaged, whatever the outcomes are.
Awesome. And so when you help these clients sort of figure out their genre, do you just do you give them a list of stuff and they kind of pick on what choose it, what is a good fit, or do you kind of hear about their story and you kind of plug it in, or how do you kind of connect what they have to say with one of these sort of storytelling genres?
It's a collaborative conversation. And I look at what their story of origin is, and that's something that everybody who's listening can look at their own story of origin, right? How did I come up with the name for my company? How did I start my idea of a problem? Was it a problem I was personally experiencing and I wanted to solve it for myself and other people? Those kinds of story of origins are really important to give people a sense of what your culture is and why you are the right person to solve their problem.
Awesome, and that makes a lot of sense. And I was on an interview a couple of weeks ago, and he was asking about my origin story, and I hadn't really thought about that for a couple of years. And I kind of thought to myself, oh, well, there's some kind of good breakthroughs and aha moments and stuff like that that are sort of interesting. But as I was sort of answering these questions and telling this, I was sort of concerned that maybe I was kind of sort of talking about myself too much, because sometimes when people are kind of telling these stories, it's all about them and all about them, and they might even keep it entertaining and keep it short and stuff like that, and even make a point. But then it's this whole story all about them, and some of these guys will tell 2 or 3 little stories in a row, and it's geez, it's all about you. So I mean, have you sort of seen that, or is there a way to kind of avoid that kind of mistake, or is that not even a problem?
Well, sure. If you should tell one story, not three stories, right? And so, for example, one of the things that people look for and someone they hire or invest in is that they have tenacity and perseverance. So Martin doesn't get up and say, I'm someone who has tenacity and perseverance. He tells a story where he shows you he has that to survive the jungle, right? So when I'm working with my architecture client, Gensler, there's typically a team slide where they show the 6 or 7 people that are going to be working on the project if they get hired. and I have them say one little anecdote or story about themselves as opposed to, hi, I've worked here 10 years and this is what I do. It's more along the lines of, here's what inspired me to become an architect. When I was 11 years old, I played with Legos and I've loved it ever since. And now I'm an architect and I actually have a son who's 11 right now and I play Legos with him, right? So that's warm, that's endearing. Another person on the Gensler team, I asked, what did you do before Gensler? Well, I was in the Israeli army. I said, great. We're going to take that same focus and discipline and apply it to making sure that this project comes on time and under budget. And they win more business that way because stories are how we remember people, and you're selling yourself first through storytelling.
Awesome. And so if someone's sort of looking for those raw materials to to sort of basically show instead of tell, like what would you say if someone is sort of like almost like wondering if they even have some sort of interesting stories? Because like I'm sure if I
Mm-hmm.
think back, I'll find something sort of interesting, but I don't have
Mm-hmm.
anything as crazy as being naked in the jungle. So what do you have to
Right.
say about that?
Well, everybody has a story, and there's all kinds of places that I work with my clients on how to find them. We start with your family. Usually, there's all kinds of crazy stories that you learn from some crazy aunt or eccentric uncle, or some kind of thing that your parents had to survive, and lessons learned from that. That's one source. A vacation that you took. So, for example, for me, in conversation, I can say, one of my goals was to take a dog sled ride on a glacier in Alaska. And it turned out to be much more difficult than I expected, but it was exhilarating and worth it. The first time I booked a cruise to Alaska 5 years ago, the seas were so rough that we couldn't pull into shore to do the experience. Then 5 years after that, I said, I'm going to try again, and then it was sold out. But I put my name on a waiting list, and that morning, my name cleared. And as we were driving to get on the helicopter to land on the glacier, the helicopter pilot said, you guys are lucky. Yesterday it was so foggy we couldn't land on the glacier. And I realized, wow, you have to really want to do this. And everything has to line up just so. And then when we got there, they had an American flag. There's 100 dogs that live on the glacier, and people live there for weeks at a time with no internet. And you felt like you're on a different planet. And when that dog sled pulled and I was standing there holding the reins, I felt an exhilaration I've never felt before, and it was completely worth all the effort to get there. Boom. So that tells you a lot about me, tells you I like a little bit of adventure, tells you I don't give up real easily. And so there's stories like that that don't have to be dramatic, like Naked in the Jungle, but there's some story that you have. So those are two examples, your family and vacations. That's just two of many places to start.
Awesome, and those are great starting points because, like, just from you kind of listing some of those, even just those two things, like, weird stuff that family members did and things like that, and vacations. I mean, like, I just went from not like just drawing a complete blank to like as you were explaining those, like, 5 or 10 different sort of little things kind of came into my head as far as like going to this place, or like you said, like a trip that like almost didn't happen, or like you lucked out, or like you had some sort of revelation as you were approaching, like lots of cool stuff there. And so if someone's sort of trying to figure out this story and all that, it seems almost like there's like a sweet spot between, like, like you don't want to be too long-winded, but then you also don't want to be too concise, because it seems like with this whole storytelling thing, like there's some component of like painting a picture and like making someone think that they're there. So like if you're telling a story and you're like, and then someone like knocked on the door and like knocking on the thing. So like how do you know where to find that sweet spot? Like, how do you know if you're like saying enough but not too much?
Well, you can get feedback. You can practice in front of your friends and say, did that story make sense? Is it too much exposition or too little? Were you confused, or did you feel like you were on the dog sled ride with me?
Okay. So cool. So it's just a matter. So it almost seems like it's sort of like a comedian sort of testing out their material, like try out different things and try like different
Yes,
ways to say that, and then based on all that sort of feedback over time, you have like the most like optimized version of that story.
exactly. Your pitch gets refined better and better. You want to think of these meetings when you're trying to get a job or get someone to be a client. These are your Super Bowl meetings, right? You're like an athlete or your Olympic moment. So you have to practice and train for it just like athletes do or actors do before they get on the set. And people are sometimes afraid that they're going to sound robotic. And I say, no, no, no. You still have a conversation, but you're so well rehearsed that it doesn't sound memorized. So you have to be in the moment, but you should know what your opening is and what your closing is and what your big takeaway is.
Awesome. So can you repeat that again? So you need to know what your opening is, your closing, and big takeaway. Is that right?
That's right. That's exactly right, Robert.
Cool. So it sounds sort of like it's good to have this kind of ammunition and like you kind of have somewhat of a plan on how things are going, knowing that you're still going to have some sort of curveballs thrown your way, but at least you sort of have that structure to know in like a general sense how you're going to go, and then you'll fill in the blanks sort of on your feet in the moment.
Well, and if you need to fill in the blanks in the moment, ideally you've got the whole, where you're going at all times. And if somebody throws you a question in the middle of it, you can get right back to your story because you've said it so many times to yourself and you've practiced the opening and closing and you know where you are at all times. You're like a pilot on a plane, right? You've got a flight plan, you know where you're going, and if there's a little turbulence, it doesn't throw you because you get right back on schedule.
Awesome. So sort of along those lines, so if you have a client and they're getting ready, for like a job interview or like a pitch meeting or something like that, like what sort of things should they have to be prepared for this?
Well, first of all, you have to really get your mindset in the right frame of mind. That's why stacking your moments of certainty is so important. And you need to stand up and practice, not just say it to yourself in the mirror, because you're going to get nervous, most likely. And the butterflies in your stomach, the goal is not to get rid of them, but to get them to fly in formation.
Awesome.
So that what that means is you get the nervous energy out of your stomach and you make a gesture. And stop worrying about whether people are liking you or judging you or not, because that's what causes the nerves. It's not about you. Put the focus on the audience, the client, the person interviewing you. And the minute you do that, then you avoid these cliche things like, I'm so excited to be here. You know what? The audience doesn't care that you're excited to be there. Don't say stuff like that. It's boring and cliche.
Awesome, and you're sort of just you're reminding me about a lot of things. Like for example, like makes you think of like back when I was in like the school band and we'd have a concert coming up, and like the day or two before the concert, we would run through like the whole entire thing as if it was real, and I think we'd
Mm-hmm.
even like dress up as if that day to school as if like the same way we dress up as the concert, just to be as close as possible, like in the moment. And that was sort of thing that like was from my childhood, and I totally forgot. But then maybe like a few years ago, I was at some event and I saw someone presenting, and this person like he kept on telling me like how much he'd practiced and how ready he was and stuff, and he was in this group full of people. But then for some reason he kept, and there was like 100 plus people in the room, and he kept on looking at the laptop. He like would look at the screen, look back at his computer, and I kept thinking like that's weird. Like he's like all excited and he's gesturing, but he's only looking at the screen behind him and then over at the laptop, not even in the people in the room. And my guess about that sort of thing was that when he had rehearsed by himself in a hotel room and had the computer there, and because he had rehearsed like in that way, like almost like to the computer, that when it came time to present on stage in person live and there's all different things to remember in the moment, he kind of like, because he rehearsed with the computer, he kept on kind of pointing back and looking back at that. And so I can definitely relate to having seen it and all that kind of stuff, like, and standing up and practicing as if it was real. And then also, like you said, like the butterflies flying information, because like back in the sort of school band days, I mean, I used to get nervous because like we all do. And then as soon as I realized that, like, well, if I fight the nervousness or I try to ignore it or push it down, that's not going to work. But if I kind of redirect it and use it as a way to kind of be present in the moment and be like, fully aware and alert and turned on and all that stuff, then that seemed like a better way of kind of going about it, like work with the nervousness instead of fighting it.
That's great. You totally get it, Robert. In fact, when Broadway productions are going up, they literally have dress rehearsals before they do the show to the audience. So the more you can get your brain in the mindset of, oh, I know how to do this. Athletes, visualize themselves standing on the, metal box. You have to visualize the end result and visualize every step of jumping over, whatever the hoop is. The other thing that you said that I really like is really making sure that the slides are not your crutch and that they're just a prop and that you're making eye contact with the audience. There's three unspoken questions that everyone has when they listen to you pitch, whether it's two people in the room or 100. And the first one is, do I trust you? And that's a gut thing. And that's where the fight or flight response comes from, right? Is it safe to be here or not? That's where the handshake actually was a symbol of, I don't have a weapon in my hand, you can stay here. And one of the best ways to build trust is to make eye contact with the people you're talking to. And then it moves from our gut to the heart, which is, do I like you? And the best way to increase your likability is to show empathy. Literally say things that show the audience that you're putting yourself in their shoes. And then it goes to someone's head, which is, will this work for me? And again, that's where the story comes in, where you tell the story of someone else who is just like you, had that same kind of problem. We fix it for them. We can do the same for you. So it's gut, heart, head.
Awesome. So first, do I trust you, and eye contact, and that way they kind of get that gut feeling, and then do I like you? Is there empathy? Is there the heart part, and then the head part? Is this work for me? And it sounds like this even kind of just like runs parallel to sort of all that sort of salesmanship stuff, like kind of do something to get their attention, and then kind of warm them up and build up with the emotional stuff, and then at the end when it comes time to make that decision, whether it's hire me or get me on another round of interviews, get me to the next level, or invest in my company or work together or whatever, that part near the end is sort of that logical decision making point. But it's almost like by the time they're at that point, the decision's almost made up to a certain extent, but it's like that there's that important sort of emotional stuff to get to that point before it comes time to switch on the logical brain side of things.
Yes, people buy emotionally and then back it up with logic. So if all you're doing is talking numbers, you're going to bore people and they're not going to say yes. They're in the analytical mode. That's why storytelling is so powerful. It's the right side of our brain, and it pulls people in, and then they'll justify it. Like, for example, if you're going to go buy an expensive sports car, they don't start talking to you about miles per gallon. They say, you're going to look really hot in this car. You're going to feel sexy. And that's how you go, oh, I need this car. And then, okay, how much is it?
Right, and then by that time, it's like how much is it is almost an afterthought, or it's like
Yes,
if it gets 21 miles per gallon compared to 25 miles per gallon, it's like, well, I don't care about a little 4 miles per gallon because I already got
yes,
fixated on how good I'm going to look in it.
exactly. Going to feel. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, look and feel on how other people are going to see me, and just all that stuff. And so great stuff. So people need to kind of have more confidence and need to use storytelling in the things that they do. And so as we're sort of winding down here, when people clients of yours and people like that, when they start using more storytelling to get more attention and to get what they want, do you ever see anyone sort of stumbling, or do you see, like, as they're starting to use storytelling in their marketing and their presenting, have you ever seen like a universal number one mistake happen with all these sorts of people?
Yes, actually, if people text the word pitch to 66866, I'll send a free PDF of the 3 mistakes to avoid when you are pitching. But the number one mistake is lack of preparation, lack of confidence, and a lack of connection with the audience.
Okay, cool. And so by that sort of thing, so preparation, confidence, and connection, they could just kind of break down or figure out maybe out of those 3 things, like where's my weakest, or what could use the most improvement, and then maybe focus on just one of those sort of sub areas.
Exactly.
Awesome. So just to make sure that everyone kind of gets that as we're listening, they should send a text message to 66866 and send the word pitch, PITCH, to get that PDF report on how to correct those 3 mistakes. And then, so if people have listened to our talk today about, pitching and storytelling and confidence building and all that kind of stuff, and they want to know more about who you are and what you do and what they should check out, where should they go for those sorts of things?
My website, which is my name, John Livesay, Liv as in Victor, Esay. You can also Google The Pitch Whisperer and I come up, or the Successful Pitch Podcast is on iTunes and on my website.
Awesome. So johnlivesay.com, JohnLivesay.com, and then that podcast, the Successful Pitch Podcast. So go there and check that out. And that's an interview show, right, where you interview different guests and people like that?
Yes, I've interviewed everyone from Kevin Harrington, one of the original sharks on Shark Tank, to best-selling New York Times authors on how to become a great storyteller, how to deal with the toxic workplace. I interviewed a great guy named Isaac Litsky, who wrote a book called Eyes Wide Open, who happens to be blind, and how he is still able to be a successful business owner.
Awesome. So all kinds of topics, all kinds of guests. So go to johnlivesay.com and check out what's there. Check out the Successful Pitch podcast. And if they really really like what you have to say, and they say, well, I'm looking to like hire John Livesay as sort of my coach to pitch better. Is that a thing you do?
Oh, yes, absolutely. People can, on my website, there's a place you can book in time to us to have a chat to see if you either need a keynote speaker on getting to yes or need a half day workshop on how to get your team more engaged through storytelling, or if you just want some one on one coaching on how to be a better storyteller so that you can get more clients. That's what I do.
Awesome. And do you know off the top of your head, like when someone's at that site, what they should click on, where they should go to contact you about that sort of thing?
Yes, it's very clear. It says book in time here, contact.
Perfect. So can't mess that one up. So book anytime here, contact. And then so make sure everyone go to johnlivesay.com to go to that contact form if you need it. Go to that Successful Pitch podcast show to listen to it if that's what you want. And you know what? One final thing, John, as we're signing off, like, have you ever thought about like using your last name in sort of like a fun play on words? Because like every now and then I think about doing that for my last name Plank, and like I never
hmm
quite can like figure out something that sounds okay. So I mean, yeah. Have you ever experimented with like live, say, any sort of that stuff?
I haven't because sometimes people think, is that your real last name already? So I don't want. I am really big about being authentic, and you need to come up with something memorable about yourself without having it be a play on words. I think from your last name. So I'd rather be known as the Pitch Whisperer, and my name is John Livesay, as opposed to playing on off my name.
Fair enough. Okay, then I think I'm on the right track because, like, yeah, every time I kind of start to brainstorm, I'm like, well, like walking the plank or like pirates, and then I just see it gets stupid really fast. So I just kind of say like, okay, maybe my marketing and my branding should just be what the thing is, as opposed to a play on words on my last name. So just kind of wanted to throw that in there.
Yes.
So good feedback on that. So everyone go right now to johnlivesay.com. One more time, JOHNLIVESAY.com, and check out what John is up to these days lately with his offers, with his interview guests, and his blog, and all that fun stuff. And I want to thank you so much, Mr. John, the Pitch Whisperer, for stopping by and sharing what you had to share today.
It was great. It was a lot of fun. Thanks, Robert.
This is Robert Plank. And would you like to be a guest on the program? Do you have an idea for a future episode? Or do you just want to tell us how we're doing? Get in touch with us right now at robertplank.com/ask to let us know.